Bring the lights down low, it's time to show. Lights, camera, you know what we mean. Behold the magic of the silver screen. Some movies rock, some movies shock, they're powerful, alright. We cover them all on your favorite part. So many movies we can choose, even when you win, you lose. Life moves pretty fast, some will fizzle and some movies last. I understood there would be no math, it's the 30-something movie podcast. Be excellent to each other, please add a word to your mother. They're from the best decades, movie magic that never fades. Lightsabers clash, phasers set to stun, action packed from dusk till dawn. We have deep thoughts and questions three, come share our love of the movies we see. Life moves pretty fast, some will fizzle and some movies last. I understood there would be no math, it's the 30-something movie podcast.
Yes, it is the 30-something movie podcast. I'm your host, John Reed, and tonight we are here to talk about Hoop Dreams. I have with me my teammates here on the court, Patrick Canagala. How are you doing?
Great, John. Hey, everybody.
Doing all right? It's been a good week?
It's been a great week. I'm slurring my words. That's how great of a week it's been.
Yeah,
it's been a great week.
Well, the people can't see, but you're on the back of your boat.
I'm on the back of my boat.
Yeah. The sun is out.
Yes.
The beaches are open. Yeah.
The beaches are open.
Yeah.
Yes. Life is good.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm here. We're talking movies. I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not elsewhere. If I was elsewhere, I wouldn't be doing as good.
Mm-hmm.
No. Dennis, how are you doing?
Good. I am not on a boat.
Okay. That's fine.
My couch.
We can't all be. Oh. I'm especially glad that you're here for this one. We actually rescheduled this because this is the high school you went to. So we wanted to make sure we had you on here for this one because I think we have some questions and are curious if you have any insights on some of the things we have questions about. So I'm listing you as the expert for this episode.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. No, I was actually going to try and get somebody on here who
Oh, okay.
I kind of tried to contact him. I don't know if he was busy tonight or what, but we rescheduled. Yeah, he was an assistant basketball coach, became the head coach of basketball who took over for Gene Pingatore after Pingatore passed away. But yeah.
Okay. All right. And then Bo Warmbold. How are you doing, Bo?
I am well, gentlemen.
Good.
Happy to be here.
I always, and the people can't see this, Bo, but the microphone thing that you have now, the fact that it has like a little light on it, you always look like Iron Man to me. You have
I know,
like this little
right there.
light on your chest right there. Like I feel
It's
like you got
actually the most annoying color of blue.
some- okay.
When you catch it out of the corner of your eye, you feel like someone's shining a laser pointer at you.
Oh, okay.
Drives me
Mhm.
absolutely batty.
Okay.
But it's one of the best USB microphones I own. So
Oh, there
here we
you go.
are.
I just see it as proof that Bo Warmbold does have a heart.
Aww.
Yeah.
That's so
Be there.
sweet.
Aw. Well, you know, it didn't come from me then. All right. Well, the movie we're talking about tonight is Hoop Dreams. We spoil freely, so if we start to mention another movie you don't want to be spoiled, just hit that little skip button a couple times. We should have moved on. Visit our website, 30podcast.com. You can leave a rating, leave a voicemail, become a co-executive producer over there on Patreon. We have got a bunch of Patreon bonus episodes that you can listen to as well. Full-length episodes, short episodes, little 10, 15-minute deals, but a ton of episodes. We are nearing 50 full-length episodes over there, so there is a ton of bonus content that you can get joining us at any level over there on Patreon. But that really helps out the show, helps us cover some of the costs of the show. Like we're not here to make money, but it just helps to cover, to quote, not the movie that we're going to be talking about next week, but another movie, The Gambler with Kenny Rogers. We just want to break even. We just want, the best you can hope for is to die in your sleep, and somewhere in the darkness, the podcast, it broke even. That's all we want to do. So I was singing The Gambler in the car earlier today, so that's why the lyrics are stuck in my head, as you are wont to do on a nice sunny weekday, I guess. Yeah, so Hoop Dreams. This one came out on October 14th, 1994, after almost 10 years of production. I believe it started in 87? Is it 87 or 88? Sometime around then is when they started filming. Rating of PG-13, a runtime of 2 hours and 50 minutes. Directed by Steve James, who did The Interrupters and Life Itself. He was also one of the writers, producers. Frederick Marks was one of the writers as well and a producer. He did the movies Journey from Zanskar and Boys to Men. And then Peter Gilbert was another of the producers. He did Prefontaine and Stevie. Composer was Ben Sidran, who did Life Itself and Public Speaking. Cinematographers were Peter Gilbert and Keith Walker, and they both worked on the movie Prefontaine. And then the editor was William Haugs. He did Crumb and Steal a Pencil for Me. The production company is Cardam Quinn Films, and the budget was $700,000. Box office was $11.8 million. Flickmetrics gives it an 89%. Cinema Score did not have a score for this one. So a couple of trivia things real quick before we'll give you some trivia. We'll get into the synopsis. We'll do some major moments to kind of sum up what the movie is about. And then we'll kind of start to dig into, our opinions of the movie or opinions of things that happened in the movie and just, digging into the topic a little bit more. But some of the trivia stuff. So apparently Roger Ebert, after the movie did not receive an Oscar nomination, he and Gene Siskel had learned a bit more about the nominating process. And apparently here's kind of how it worked for documentaries. Members of the Academy's documentary committee held flashlights when they watched the documentaries, and anyone who had given up on watching it waved it against the screen, and the movie would get turned off if a majority waved their flashlights. Apparently this movie was turned off after 15 minutes, which is shocking to me. However, not as shocking is I don't know if this is a rumor or how accurate this is, but supposedly somebody on the committee was in some way tied in with another movie that was up for a documentary award that year. So I guess there was a bit of a rumor going around that there was some, inside stuff being done to make sure that other documentary got pushed a little bit more towards the top. So I'm not sure if that's true, but either way, that's a terrible way to determine what the best documentary is.
Yeah. Hopefully things have modernized slightly since then.
Yes. Well, and because of this movie, they did change the process that they used. And they actually had, the people on that committee, my understanding is, were not documentary filmmakers at all. So they've changed the process. I believe now the voting is done by other documentarians, or at least a portion of other documentarians. So they did change that process after it was discovered based on this movie not getting nominated. That's what their process was. So. During the movie, as depicted in the movie, the electricity was turned off in the AG home, and the filmmakers ended up paying for it to get turned back on. So just kind of dealing with some of the other struggles. This one I thought was kind of interesting. The film was originally supposed to be a 30-minute PBS special about multiple players on a single team. And then after 5 years, the filmmakers had shot something like 250 hours of footage, which had to be trimmed down they got it trimmed down to the 3 hours that we saw. But originally it was supposed to be a 30-minute special. I do not know how you trim down 250 hours to 30 minutes. Like, that is a massive, gargantuan feat of editing that I wouldn't wish on anybody. Arthur Agee was chosen as the number one pick in the newly formed USBL by the Florida Sharks in 1995. He was released by the team, and he was quickly picked up by another team, the Long Island Surf. He eventually ended up in Canada, playing on the Winnipeg Cyclones. Among some of the players you can see at the Nike summer camp in those scenes that William Gates attended, you can see Jalen Rose, Chris Webber, Juwan Howard. They were all together as part of that class. In 2007, I'd be curious to track this one down. In 2007, Arthur Agee made his own personal Hoop Dreams follow-up called Hoop Reality, where he mentored John Marshall Metropolitan High School student Patrick Beverly. Beverly then went on to play in the NBA, and as of 2023, plays for the Philadelphia 76ers. So Arthur made his own documentary many years later. William Gates and his wife Catherine moved to San Antonio, Texas, along with their sons because they had kind of gotten tired of Chicago, some of the different issues of living in Chicago. They just were kind of done with it. They had both lived there their entire lives, but they wanted their sons to play basketball only if they wanted to, but not have it forced upon them. So I think it just sounded like they needed some separation from the city of Chicago. So they went south and ended up living in San Antonio. There was a lot of tragedy for both players after this movie was finished. In 94, Arthur Agee's older half-brother D'Antonio was gunned down at the Cabrini Green housing complex. In 2001, William Gates' brother Curtis was killed in a carjacking. 2004, Arthur's father Bo was shot to death in an alleyway. And I was reading here in 2009 at a 15th anniversary screening at the Gene Siskel Film Center in Chicago, Arthur was there, and he told the audience there that about 10 of his friends that you see in the movie had died since the making of that film. In the 15 years since it was made, he had lost 10 of the friends that appeared in the movie itself.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I guess Steve James, the director of this, said in an interview in 2010 that he claimed he had only a couple small regrets about the documentary. First one is he would have shot more footage of Arthur at school to show some of the academic struggles. He felt like, that would have been something he would have liked to add it into it. And then second, he would have included footage of Arthur auditioning for the part of Isiah Thomas in a TV movie, A Mother's Courage, the Mary Thomas Story. So he said those were his only two regrets related to this movie. All right, our synopsis for this one. In a world where the dream of making it to the NBA may be the only way out of the ghetto, a documentary crew follows two Chicago teens through high school as they try to make that dream a reality. Arthur Agee and William Gates face the ultimate test of ambition, perseverance, and survival. With the guidance of family and mentors, their journey through high school basketball in Chicago is a battle for a better future.
Begins with a game, with a basket and a ball. It becomes a journey of heartbreak and hope, from city streets to the brink of fame.
Isiah Thomas!
The amazing story of two boys and two families struggling against the odds.
My mother, God bless her, she's always said to me, this America, you can make something of your life.
Against the system.
You have to realize you can make their team win.
To make a dream come true.
All I ever dreamed about was playing in the NBA.
People ask me, will I remember them if I make it? I tell them, will you remember me if I don't?
Hoop Dreams. An extraordinary true story. A unique motion picture experience.
Breaking the plot down into 10 major moments. So we start off with, it is, I believe, 1987 when we start off, and William Gates, Arthur Agee are two African-American teenagers from poor neighborhoods in Chicago. They are recruited by a scout from St. Joseph High School in Westchester, Illinois, known for its outstanding basketball program, coached by Gene Pingator, who coached the NBA Hall of Famer Isiah Thomas. That gets mentioned several times that he had been his high school coach. Gates starts on the varsity team, helping them win the sectional title, earning recognition as potentially the next Isiah Thomas. Agee, meanwhile, is struggling on the freshman team and in the classroom, and he's having difficulties adjusting to this new environment. Agee is ultimately forced to leave St. Joe due to his family's inability to pay tuition. Gates's fees are covered by his sponsor, the president of Encyclopedia Britannica, apparently. AG's self-confidence is damaged when he has to go back to his public school in Chicago, leading to some poor performance at his new school, John Marshall High School. But Gates continues to excel at St. Joseph, but does struggle with the high expectations from his brother. AG's new coach, Luther Bedford, helps him to improve, but the AG family faces some financial and personal stuff that's going on in their lives, including unemployment, drug addiction from his father. Gates, back at St. Joseph, suffers a knee injury requiring surgery and a lengthy rehab time. AG's family faces some further hardship with his mother losing her job, the family going on welfare, and despite all this, both boys are continuing to pursue these basketball dreams. Gates is able to come back and plays tentatively due to the injury, missing some crucial free throws that eliminate St. Joseph from the playoffs for that year. AG's team, John Marshall, improves their record and achieves some notable victories in the meantime, including an upset win over Dunbar Vocational High School. Despite the injury, Gates is attracting significant interest from some college basketball programs, especially Marquette University. He attends the Nike All-American Summer Camp, where he meets some prominent figures like Dick Vitale and Spike Lee. AG receives far less attention, but is still drawing interest from some junior colleges. Gates' senior year at St. Joseph ends early with a second-round playoff loss, partly due to him being benched for arriving late to the game. AG leads John Marshall on a remarkable run to the state championship, where they finished third after a semifinal loss to Manual High School. Gates struggles to achieve his minimum ACT score required for an athletic scholarship to Marquette, while AG continues to hope for a chance to play college basketball despite some of the fewer opportunities that he's got. And then the film concludes with Gates entering Marquette University, AG attending Mineral Area College in Missouri. Both are still holding on to the dreams of playing in the NBA someday and reflecting on just the different challenges and achievements of their high school basketball careers. So that is a very quick 10 major moment rundown of the 3-hour documentary. There's definitely stuff that we've missed or haven't talked about specifically, but I think that'll kind of come out as we get into the rest of our discussion here. So let's step up to the free throw line and think a little bit deeper about this one.
And now, Deep Thoughts.
I have an opinion on this matter.
Don't mince words, Bones. What do you really think?
I like it a lot.
Wow. It's very deep. Thank you.
So we've been watching several different documentaries lately, and we have the PBS app. Like, we pay for the subscription to the PBS app, and there's a lot of documentaries on there. And, my wife, I was sitting down to watch this, and I was thinking, well, I don't know if anybody else in the family is going to be interested in a 3-hour documentary on, kids trying to play high school basketball. So I turned it on, and then like half the family sat down and just started watching it with me. And I think part of that is she had been watching some documentaries on the PBS app that were very similar in kind of their focus. And actually they took place in Chicago as well. And it was dealing with things like somebody who had been recently released from prison and what it was like for them to try to get back into society after spending many years in prison. Another of the episodes, and these were more like shorter, maybe 1 hour, hour and a half type episode documentaries. One was on homelessness and things like that. So we'd kind of been in a little bit of a string of watching documentaries and specifically ones that take place in and around Chicago. And so that was a little, added bonus to starting this one and watching this one when we did. But yeah, this was my first time ever watching Hoop Dreams. I'd never seen Hoop Dreams before. I'd always seen it, like the cover of the poster, the cover of it was familiar to me. I had heard about it. I knew what it was. I just never had sat down and watched it before. So this for me was a first time watch, and yeah, it was awesome. I thought it was an awesome documentary. It made me angry 30 years later to find out that it just got completely snubbed with no kind of award nominations, no Oscar award nominations at all, and the way that was all handled. So, I thought it was awesome. I absolutely loved it. What about you guys? When was the first time you saw this? Is this the first time watching this for everybody else, or have you seen this before?
First time for me. I knew of its existence. I knew the basic premise, but I didn't know any of the details until I watched it for this evening's recordings.
Same boat for me. I remember when it came out, but this is the first time.
Okay.
I had seen it back then, obviously having gone to St. Joe's, but then another time relatively close within that like initial release. And then I hadn't seen it for a long time. And I didn't get to see all 3 hours. I saw bits and pieces for this, but I didn't get to see everything just time wise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things, and I think we already mentioned this real quick, is that we wanted to pull back the curtain a little bit. We were actually going to be recording this one, I think, a couple weeks ago. And Dennis, you were out of town, and we were like, oh, well, this is Dennis's high school. Like, we want Dennis to be on this one because he might have, were you there at the same time?
I graduated in 89, and I believe it was Gates. And I remember Gates. I think that was they were there for 1 year, I think freshman year with me.
Yeah.
So they were not, so they were just getting there. I think, because I think weren't they the same age? I'm pretty sure they were, but I graduated in 89. I think they were 88 is because they got scouted in 87. I think they started. It was their freshman year.
Yeah.
I do remember cameras and stuff being around, not as much. I think that went a lot after I left. It became more of a filming thing. So like you said, I think they start off with an idea small and then it got bigger. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. So I was attending school when it was still on the small end.
Okay. All right. What was it? Do you remember much about kind of the reaction? Because I know one of the things the school.
St. Joe's was hurt, I think, after that for some reason. I felt like when I say hurt, I think, like it's, you could see it in reviews or people saying, even though, you look at it and there are some things in there, I don't know if it's, I know it was definitely a touchy subject because of, I think Pingatore felt like some of them felt like that they had made them look bad in the film. Mm-hmm. And that's a question. I guess I am curious to see what you guys think. If you specifically think that the school or the people in there were portrayed badly, or is it more the nature of the way this goes down just with sports and athletes and everything else and the way that some of those things are sort of treated? But, because obviously like going to the school, knowing people and knowing those people personally and knowing, what they did for my family and knowing what they did for other families. And I know more backstory to it all in terms of other people, doesn't mean that things didn't happen that were in the film. Obviously you see certain things happen, but I just wonder if it's more of like more in people's head who went there, or, are we more defensive because it's close to home? How do you guys see it as when you see this film? Or I guess you could say, how do you see St. Joe's, or how do you see Pingatore? How do you see them as, is there that negative that you get from it? Because you see it in some reviews, and I think that's obviously what Star is. Some reviews will say that, other ones will say, well, it's not in a bad light, the whole film. It's not really that. So I'm just curious, because sometimes you're too close to it to know what's real and what's not real.
Yeah, it's interesting that because I thought at some moments I was kind of impressed that they were focusing on the grades a little more than I thought they would. Because you hear a lot about, high performing programs will, sweep that under the rug or find a way to get around some of that. So I did like that part surprised me, and I don't think that painted them in such a bad light. But what got me was the unofficial recruiter guy. And I'm already forgetting the character's name. I should look it up because it shouldn't be hard for me to find. But it was so weird. And I'm sitting there going, God, is this really how things go down? Some guy drives around and hangs out at a basketball court and says, hey, you could play basketball at this school. It just seems so weird. And, maybe that's how things go down. I don't know. But it just seemed so odd to me. I'm going to find the guy's name here. It's Earl Smith, the talent scout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In air quotes. It was, even the way they introduced him is like some unofficial, it almost made him sound self-appointed talent. It was just so odd. So that was a little weird. I was like, I don't know. And I get that, the Catholic schools, always have to, you have to find kids for your programs. I get all that. It was just so weird.
Yeah. I think I felt that it definitely, I don't know whether it was, malicious is not the right word, but I do feel like it definitely painted St. Joseph in the role of the villain of the documentary because of just some of the ways that when you started to find evidence for, well, why did Arthur have to leave? I mean, that part in particular, I think, why did he have to leave? And true or not, again, we're being presented with the highly edited version of 250 hours of film, which is in and of itself an edited version of reality of what happened. But when Arthur's mother, I think, says things like, well, we were told we were going to be getting a free ride when he went to school here, and we had to pay for books, and we had to pay for this, and we had to pay for this other supplies, and we had to pay for this, and we just didn't expect it. And when you've got a family for whom money is already really, really tight, and you've got these schools that are recruiting these kids to come out, and I mean, you're kind of almost locking them into this path that nearly guarantees that the family is going to be in over their heads financially. So, I mean, that part, I think, really bothered me, if that's all true. If it's true that they were told one thing and they ended up having to pay for other things that they weren't expecting to have to pay for. I mean, that to me is like a big red flag and makes me sit there and go, God, that's dirty pool. Like, that's not cool at all. Yeah, and then just, I don't know, just some of the different ways. What made me feel a little bit uneasy, too, was when you had, and I can start us on a whole debate of the white savior narrative if you want to, because I know I'm really good at that. But the one scene where you have, Gates being given some of that additional support by his sponsors, quote unquote sponsors, to me, it felt like something out of the Hunger Games. Like, it felt to me like, oh, you gotta look good. You gotta get your sponsors they'll send you stuff when you're in the arena, so you'll be able to survive and you'll be able to this. And he's got these sponsors that are basically saying, hey, you've done great. You did really well for us. So we're going to pay everything. Like, we're going to cover the cost of all this. And, he got that, but Arthur didn't, because Arthur, happened to be struggling a little bit more. And I don't know, part of me, and I'm not, I'm probably never going to be an athletic coach because I'm not as naturally a competitive enough person to probably have the right mindset for that. But I'm watching this and I'm going, if you really and truly were recruiting Arthur and you were going to invest in him, I feel like you'd give him a little bit more time. I feel like, he, and maybe he as a student and as an athlete didn't, put forth the kind of effort they were expecting. So they probably felt like, well, he let us down too. But I don't know. For me, I'm like, maybe I would have thrown a little bit more support and seen what the kid could do. And maybe I would have given him a little bit longer. Maybe he gets a second year to go there. And I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. Some of the ways that he was then kind of sent packing, sat uneasy with me. But again, I'm watching all this and I'm going, I know I'm seeing the version of the history of this through the eyes of the documentary filmmaker, and also through the eyes of the people that are in it. And I can't guarantee that all of them are being. So based on the documentary itself, I kind of came away feeling like, man, I don't know if all this is true, but I don't know that they made St. Joseph High School look all that great. There's a lot of kind of questionable stuff. But I also had to look back on it as, well, this was a long time ago. I wasn't there. I don't know the full story, but they're not looking real good, And the fact that they were expecting this to be a half-hour PBS thing, and then when they found out it was going to be some big full-length, 3-hour movie, I don't know if they sued the director for that, but they got really upset and they had to settle all this financially, and like some of that doesn't look good either. But I'm also sitting there thinking, well, I don't know what is perception, what is reality, but if I'm just judging it based on the documentary itself, I'm not sure St. Joe comes out looking real great in some of this. And I don't know who's to blame for that. I don't know. Is it the school administrators? Is it the coach himself? Is it, was Arthur not putting forth as much effort as as he probably could have? Sure, probably. I mean, he's a teenager.
Fair point.
I think 14 and 15-year-olds are going to let you down. So, But yeah, I think that's how I kind of came away with it. Is like there was several things that made me not a fan of the St. Joe as it was depicted in the documentary. But I don't know if that's how it really was.
You know, John, it's interesting because, like you said, that this movie, we watched this, and that's kind of what schooling maybe looked like 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, maybe it's the same. But I think now we live in a world where there's, okay, if a student isn't hitting their marks, what supports are we going to put in place to make that happen?
Mm-hmm.
If they're failing a class, what are we going to do to make sure they pass? If their, behaviors aren't what we need and expect and all that, what are we going to do to get them through?
Oh, absolutely. And it's a different time because it's back then. It's more on the student.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I will say that the initial scenes, right, when it was, and both of them were saying, like, the one that got all the sponsors and everything like that, I think he's being interviewed. He's like, man, they have detentions for everything around here. Like, you can't do anything, you've got to do what you do. Otherwise it's or goodbye. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to lie. There's a little bit of that. When I heard that, it's like, that's kind of refreshing. Here's the line, walk the line. You don't walk the line, goodbye, And like I said, there's that one part of it, but then when you see it, I think there's got to be a middle ground, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I think you can produce a line, and then we have to work to make sure the student hits that. But I think that was what, Dennison, to your question, I think that's what we see portrayed through the film, whether that was accurate or not, that it was like, hey, just, this is the line we need you to walk. And the hard part of that is basketball's the ticket, right? So we really don't, there was talk about getting grades and there was talk about going to colleges and all that, but the takeaway from the movie of what we saw was, as soon as you can't play basketball, everything is going to dry up and kind of goes away. And I mean, incredibly talented players, but like, what percentage of kids make it to the NBA? Do you know what I'm saying? And so it's like, where's, I hate to say reality because you don't want to crush someone's dreams, but where's the, hey, how long is your NBA career going to be? What are you going to do after that? What are you going to do in case something fails? What are you going to do in the event of injury? And I think when you see the one student that went there, was it Agee was his last name?
Mm-hmm. Arthur, yeah.
And he ended up out of the school, and like you already addressed it, was it, where was the miscommunication for what needed to be afforded and what wasn't? And we don't see why, he got bounced from the school, but you're kind of thinking like, okay, well, if he was the all-star on the basketball court and keeping his head down and doing what they asked, would he have been kicked out of the school? Right. And then there's that heartbreaking scene where his dad comes back, his dad's gone, and then dad's back, and then dad's going over to buy drugs, like, on film. Right. And it's like, oh my gosh. So, like, I mean, that obviously goes without saying that that's not any support for the student as he's trying to, like, get through life, much less play basketball. And so that's the hard part. But then when they split and he goes back to the public school, and suddenly that team starts to do well, and he seems to, suddenly it seems like he's got everything going for him because his dad gets clean and comes back and is like trying to be the strong father figure and get things squared with the school financially and all that. And suddenly things seem to start coming together for him. And it's the other kid that's still at St. Joe's that is dealing with injury after injury and not able to, get any forward motion going with the school year and everything like that. And he almost gets it almost seems like he gets burnt out with basketball. And then it ends. And again, it could be editing. It could be what scene they picked. It could be scripted, or it could be incredibly authentic. But, the last word from the coach is, yeah, well, that didn't quite work out, but there'll be another one. And it's kind of like, all right, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel with that. Like, there's not any care represented for this. It's just like, okay, if you can't make the grade, that's fine, but there's going to be 10 other kids ready to come through the door. And that's a little bit more of a cold feeling. And again, I don't know if that's accurate or not. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies. You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't. So that's kind of the picture that's presented. That's the picture presented with the film. So I don't know, Dennis, if that helps kind of clarify.
No, and I think that's why the lawsuit and all that, whatever they did, was, I think, filed because that's what they felt too. People were perceiving a lot of that as that while I think the filmmakers and other people, even Roger Ebert, I think in his review, doesn't say that it necessarily paints them in this bad light. There's enough in there that if you might not know the whole story behind something and you're only seeing bits and pieces, because not everything is like you said,
right,
is going to be on film. Does that give you the full picture? Does it slant the view in certain ways? Does it if you take one line from somebody, but you don't take the conversation that they have with the student behind closed doors that might not be on film, does that make one person look colder when maybe that's just colder on camera, but not on, and I think a different time period, like you said, is a real important thing, the way schools were done and what schools could do and couldn't do in terms of, discipline or expectations. And, kind of like, hey, that used to be the days of Catholic schools was if you don't get with the program, see ya, that type of thing. And, obviously some people will have their opinions on whether that was a good method or not. And, and I think, Pat, you even said sort of a little bit refreshing in some ways, having a little bit of that, so it's hard for me to the way I without saying, I don't want to come across in a way that because I don't know either individual very well. All right. And I don't know, I do know that my perceptions back then, because I was coaching baseball in certain years, a little bit later and stuff, but I always felt like Gates was the harder worker student. Yeah, he got played with the injuries later, but and in a way, AG sort of came from the thing of he's going to go to the NBA. And my experiences with coaches and with the personnel of St. Joe's was they never looked at you as just you're going to the NBA and you're just a sport person. No, you have this talent. Obviously, you're going to give us something. There's no doubt about that. All schools do that. Colleges all the time. And it's what's happening all the time. But like you said, I think, Bo, you said something about you're surprised at how much the academics was put in. And they weren't going to be somebody who just swept it under the rug. They felt they were going to develop the whole person, the player, the athlete. Yes, awesome if he becomes the next Isiah Thomas and makes the NBA. But if not, there's spirituality, there's religion, there's God, there's being a good person, there's doing the best you can academically, there's other opportunities. I think one of the things was sort of like, oh, well, these other kids are all going to counselors for colleges, but not them. They're just, their only shot is the NBA. And I feel that is kind of an unfair rap for St. Joe's, in my opinion. They were definitely a basketball school. They were definitely, that was what they did well. I mean, Pingatore was the winningest coach, I think, in Illinois history up until he died a couple years ago. But so many of those kids who went to him loved him. He was a father figure to so many of them. So I think the defensiveness was, while there may be some grains of truth and things that look bad when you see them on camera, maybe they happen in real life and were pretty accurate. No one's perfect. It's sort of a sad thing that one film in a way has the power then to give you that impression, John, like you said, of a place that changed so many lives and was so special for so many people. Inner city kids who came, like my classmates, it wasn't just basketball players. And there was kids from nearby, like by Proviso was Melrose, like people who didn't want to send their kids to Proviso because of the gangs or the issues or the trouble. So we had an African-American population there that I felt, we were, I don't know. I just felt like best interests were in mind of student and athlete and everything. And again, are there cases where some of those, yeah, I'm sure there is. No one's going to be like Mother Teresa perfect, but I think that was the aspirations of the school. And I felt like, again, maybe from what I gather, and again, I can't I did want to talk to a source kind of and talk a little bit about that because this would have firsthand knowledge. But I kind of felt like you can kind of tell a little bit from that in even the documentary. Like Gates was a little bit more serious academically and with the behavior, and I think like the behavior, the way his even parents and everything, like here's an opportunity that you're getting. Where I felt, where if you don't make it to the NBA, he almost didn't like the pressure of a lot of that. Like there was a lot of pressure on him to become the Isiah Thomas, and like AG felt like in a way, again, this is just hearsay of what I'm saying. It's like you're going to the NBA, so the other stuff doesn't matter as much. And I think that's when St. Joe's probably had conversations with him again, from what I had heard, and it was like it wasn't like just a sudden boom. It was more like a hey,
right.
This isn't just you get to come here, do whatever you want, and you're going to go to the NBA. Like you're just having a chance to get a great education, play basketball for us. We get something out of this, obviously, and we get hopefully some wins and all that. But at the same time, you get a great chance to become a better person and a better athlete and a better academic person as well. And the bargain wasn't met as much on one side versus the other. Is again, I can't confirm all of this, but that was the perception of people that I've talked to, and so yeah, so I guess it is a sensitive sort of subject because you feel like you're in a defensive position, defending something that's not seen on all the years, that's not seen on the camera, all the years and all the students who went through there who weren't on the camera. There's a reason people still went back and supported that school and showed up at fundraisers and showed up at all these things and went on to coach there. And I think interesting, like I know that Gates became a pastor. Saying that like the religious piece took on him, which I don't know where that was in his life prior to St. Joe's, but obviously there's a big piece there then that either helped nurture that. And then I know AG got in trouble with like a domestic or like an assault charge in like 2017. Again, I'm not casting a stone on one person or the other. I'm just saying, I think there was a different mindset from each of those. So the one looks more like a little bit more like a victim. And sometimes there can be forces that play outside of that, but sometimes it's also personal decisions people make.
Yeah.
And I wonder too and I don't want to put words in the mouths of the documentary filmmakers, but I just, for me, having viewed the movie, what I'm wondering too is, because, anytime you've got a story like this, not necessarily the mustache twirling villain, but you kind of need a villain. You need an obstacle.
Yes.
You need a villain of some kind. And I do feel like as they were trying to portray what were the obstacles that were keeping these boys from getting to their dream of being in the NBA, you've got the obstacles of, where they live, some of the violence, some of the drugs, some of the family stuff. Then you've got the school, and in AG's case, the school that told him he had to leave, whether because of his behavior or whatever. And then I think it's easier then for the school to be painted as the villain, because that's a villain you can look at and you can say, aha, yes, that's something that we could do something about that. Whereas it's a whole lot tougher to say, well, we can solve the drug problem. We can solve the housing issues in the inner city. We can solve the economic stuff. Like that stuff is not as easy to solve. It's I mean, to a certain degree, probably unsolvable. All your entire society were to change, then I think it makes it easier, whether intentional or not, to then say, okay, well, then I guess the quote unquote villain of the story, we can maybe make it look a little bit more so like it's the school, because that's a little bit easier to pinpoint. Well, we don't like what that is, and we can maybe do something about that.
Right.
And is the school painted as the villain in the sense of a greater, bigger picture of saying like, oh, we're looking at these kids from the inner city as just a commodity, as just a thing to get wins on the board. And they might be trying to make a commentary on the system.
Right.
But there means there has in this, by doing that and trying to make that point throughout your film, you are taking one school specifically.
Right.
Who's going to be associated with that system, like they're representing the system for you. Right. So that's going to be detrimental to that school. And is that fair? Is that a fair,
Yeah. I would have loved it had they followed more kids. Like, I mean, I think that's an unruly documentary if you have if you have a bunch of kids, because I feel like even though this was 3 hours long, I do feel like there was so much we didn't get to hear or learn about these two boys. So if you added, like if you were following 6 kids that had gone to different schools, so we weren't just looking at St. Joe, we weren't just looking at, when he ends up at John Marshall, all that. We actually looked to see, like, here's a bunch of different schools and here's how all these different places handled this. Then I think it's probably easier to say that it's more of a, we're examining the system and what does the system do to these kids where they think the only opportunity they have is to get out and get into the NBA, where because I think part of what came across to me is that whether that was him, not working up to his potential there or not, but Arthur, some of those scenes afterwards, it kind of like you were heartbroken for the kid because it's like, he almost seemed to feel like, well, I'm not worthy of this top tier school that I got a chance to go to. I'm not worthy of this. Me as a person, I'm not worthy of this kind of education or this kind of opportunity. For a little bit after he had to leave St. Joe, like me as a viewer of the documentary, I'm sitting there thinking, man, I feel terrible for this kid because what has that got to do to shake his confidence, not just as a possible basketball player, but just as a human being, as a kid going to school. But I think it would have been helpful to see more than just St. Joe. Like there have to be other schools that are doing similar things. And then I think it probably doesn't.
At that time, I think definitely there was more. Like I said, it was. I wasn't a great basketball player. I played baseball. I ran cross country. I ran track a couple of years, but it was like I'm not some star athlete getting a scholarship there. We're the family of 5 boys, 3 with muscular dystrophy going through that school. And I always had the feeling that if I screwed up, I could be gone.
Mm-hmm.
Like I knew I wouldn't screw up because of that threat, but it was definitely like I couldn't go like, oh, I could just blow off my grades, or I could just screw around all day. Like I knew that there would be consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Like they meant business.
Right.
You well, apparently you don't belong here. Good luck somewhere else. And that was kind of the time period.
Right.
We look at this now in education and we would say, well, that's horrible. How can you do that? You can't, what are the programs you should put in place? It was a tough sort of love type of environment,
mm-hmm.
which again, I'm extremely thankful for and blessed that I went. My parents could have sent us to Morton West High School or in Cicero, and they didn't like, there's a number of like issues with gangs and not very much discipline. And that's one of the reasons our parents sent us there was for discipline. And they were very good with, tuition breaks. And I remember so many athletes, not just basketball players, but like, even if you weren't an athlete, you worked. So you painted in the summer, you worked in the cafeteria so many periods during the day, and you had jobs there that would help give you discounts on your tuition. So if you really wanted to take an opportunity of it, you had to give something. And I think that was an expectation. They weren't just giving you free rides anywhere. And I think that was also true with the athletes. And that's where, again, maybe it comes back to, was that communicated, or was that not received well, or was that not, a mutual agreement where both did their side of the bargain? And then was it a case of, well, hey, yeah, you're not doing your, I don't know what conversations happened,
mm-hmm.
And that's, I wish I was privy to that. And I don't think we're privy to that either, even through the documentary and all the hours of footage. You see what happens sometimes outside of meetings, not always what happens in a meeting.
Right.
Right.
Especially if the hosting school doesn't know the intent of this documentary.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another thing. I think, is that something that they would have like, okay, so and again, it's hypothetical. I'm not saying it's true in this case, but if there's a situation going on with one of these students and we're having conversations behind closed doors, and I just think you're making a story about basketball and about this and this and that. And this is an important part, what's happening behind the scenes in this meeting, but I'm not going to let you see, because it's not really your business to show this on camera. But at the same time, it might be pivotal in how we treat that person and what the consequences are, because we think you're making something different. But like, had I known you're going to show it like this, I would have let you in on that conversation. I would have let you see what really happened. I feel like there's a little bit of, I don't know. It's like I said, it does make me, like I said, I've reached out to some former teachers and coaches there who, because St. Joe's no longer is now anymore, closed a few years ago, but it makes me want to almost get that full story behind the scenes. Cause again, I was on the cusp of it, I had heard things through the grapevine, but again, what's right, what's not right, it's definitely nothing. I have no facts on that. I can just say what my experience was and what I experienced with other people and other people who went through there. And they usually have nothing but typically love for St. Joe's. And so for it to be painted in a bad light was unfortunate. Even though there may be some truth to the bigger story of what they're trying to tell, there's more casualties than just Arthur and William. There's the school's reputation, and did that ever have any impact? I mean, it lasted a while after that. If you think about 87, I mean, it didn't close until 2000 and something. But does that affect tuition? Does that affect its longevity? And then you have more kids that could have been possibly pulled out of more difficult situations and had an opportunity to play basketball, to play football, to play other sports, whatever it is, and get a good education, develop their spiritual side as well, and become human beings, like a holistic approach, which is how I would describe St. Joe's. I think it was a holistic approach. It was a tough love holistic approach, but with firm discipline and consequences. But it's an opportunity that then is not there. I think it's a sad thing. That, I mean, we're very sad when it closed. Yeah.
Well, and part of it, I wonder too, and I've kind of seen this, in my own son playing sports. As you're watching this documentary, as you get closer and closer to the end, it seems like Arthur is still, and maybe that's going back to the public school, and maybe that's being around, people that look and live similarly to him. It feels like from the documentary that was part of the issue too at St. Joe, that he maybe felt a little bit out of place. And that because he seemed to be a lot more comfortable once he got back to, going to the public high school in Chicago. But the other thing about it is, especially as you watch William Gates go through this, it just seems as he gets further along in the process and he goes to that camp and he's dealing with the injuries and he's dealing with the, what is it going to take for you to get to achieve your dream kind of a deal. It does feel a whole lot more like there's so much of a business side to this, and there's so much more of almost like he's losing the joy of playing the game for I've got to strive to do this. I've got to get better at this. I've got to do, these are my requirements to get to where I want to be. And I kind of feel that, from my own kids. I know my son, if you would have asked him just a few years ago, he would have been like, oh yeah, I want to play baseball in college. Maybe I want to try to get to the pros. I want to do this. I want to do this. And then it kind of, as you start to see, he's got some friends that, have gone on to college and they're working with recruiters and all kinds of other stuff. And you almost just start to see that a lot of these kids lose the love and the joy of the game. And it starts to become, well, I guess this is going to be my career. And it's like, they don't have that anymore. And I know for my own son, he's like, well, I'm not planning on playing in college anymore. I just want to enjoy. I want to love playing baseball. And I feel like if I have to do all this stuff to go to the next level, then I'm not going to enjoy it as much as I do now. And that was, I think he almost, just in conversations from last year, I think he almost didn't play this year because he almost didn't even try out for the team this year because he was concerned. He's like, well, I never did travel baseball. Most of the other guys on the team have done travel baseball. They go get extra coaching. They go do all this other stuff. He's like, I love baseball and I want to be better at it, but I also want to enjoy playing baseball. And I feel like if I have to do all these other additional extra things, it feels like it becomes more of a chore and more of a business and less of I'm playing it because I love the game kind of a deal. So I wonder how much of that also kind of factors into the fact that they didn't necessarily achieve their dreams. It seems like from the documentary, and again, I didn't know either of these people. I'm just basing it off of what I watched. It really felt to me once you reached the end of the documentary that William, even though he was going on to Marquette, it almost felt like he had kind of lost that drive to make it, to say, I got to get to the NBA. It almost felt like he was reaching a point where he was like, this was my dream when I was an 8th grader. I don't know if it's my dream anymore. And that's tough. I mean, you're following kids that are going from 8th grade to the end of high school. And how many of us had the same thoughts and feelings and dreams and drives from 8th grade to senior year in high school? Right. So, I mean, that was part of it too, reaching the end of this and just seeing that realization. And it made me think, maybe that's a good reason to show a high school kid this movie, like not to show them, oh, look, here's a couple of guys who had a dream and they failed at their dream, but rather if you want your dreams, here's what you got to do to get your dreams. But you also got to realize sometimes your dreams don't come true. And you got to figure out a way to not be completely devastated if you don't, like the very small percentage of people who actually end up doing, this moonshot thing that they had been wanting to do as their dream. Not everybody gets to do that. Not everybody's going to be, an astronaut that sets foot on the moon. Not everybody is going to be the next Michael Jordan or Isiah Thomas or whatever. And it's fine to dream for that, but you also got to, if the dream doesn't come true, that's not the end of life. Like you got to figure out where you're going to go from there and still find contentment and find joy and find all these things. So to me, that's what I think you come away with at the end of this documentary is it's a story that like teaches us a lot about, well, what's happening in the lives of these kids and what are they trying to get out of? Like what are they trying to escape from? But at the same time, it's kind of a lesson in, well, so failure is not the end. Like you followed these guys for 4 or 5 years. They quote unquote failed. I mean, they failed at their dream, but where do you go from there? I think is a really important part of it. But yeah, I mean, that's what I felt when I was getting to the end of this. I really felt like William in particular, I kind of felt bad for the kid because it seemed like he had shifted into the, okay, now basketball just kind of feels like a chore.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Which you hate to see, because I mean that's part of the. I mean I played sports in high school, but I had no intention at all of playing in college because I'm like, no, I enjoy football, and I'm going to play it for as long as I enjoy it. And when I first started on the wrestling team, I enjoyed wrestling, and then 2 years into wrestling, I did not enjoy wrestling anymore, so I didn't do wrestling anymore. I knew I was not going to college to be an NCAA Division I wrestler. So I'm like, I'm going to do this for as long as I enjoy it. And then when I don't enjoy it, I'll move on and do something else. But yeah, there seems to be a lot of pressure. I think, some of my son's teammates on his baseball team, there seems to be a lot of pressure on some of these kids, especially if they had siblings who ended up, going to play baseball in college or, going further into it. There seems to be some pressure on these kids that, well, I got to do the same thing. Like I got to keep going, even if I'm not enjoying it as much anymore. I just got to keep going. And I don't know. I'd love to find a better way.
Yeah.
Life's too short for some of that stuff. I still want people to be successful and to, drive themselves and have that kind of drive and whatever. But I don't know, they're still kids.
Well, I think it all starts so much sooner now than it used to.
Oh yeah.
Organized sports in general starts way earlier than it used to, where I think you used to get to play as a kid and play multiple sports and kind of do whatever the season it's football season. Let's go outside with the friends and play football. Let's go, and you did it on your terms. No one was forcing you.
Right.
Your parents are forcing you outside. Maybe sometimes like get your butt outside. It's a beautiful day.
Yeah.
You're not gonna sit there and watch TV all day. And then when you went out, you just started playing games and you started playing different sports. You started doing. We had races around the block. Like you were doing something, and it was your choice. So it never felt like work. And then as you got a little bit older, you started to find like, hey, these are the sports I really like, and I think I'm pretty good at. And it kind of carried you through high school without it feeling like a work thing. And then you maybe we're lucky enough to go through, college and go play in college. But the passion was still there. I just see it being burned out of kids so early now because of the adults' presence and structure and of like, here's practice these many days a week and here's a personal trainer, So
right. And I mean, what's being presented in this movie too is the kids that you see in this movie don't necessarily have all the options, right? There isn't that, hey, well, if this doesn't work out, you can do this, or if this doesn't work out, you can, and that's kind of the hard thing. And that's where, the conversation around this movie, it gets into bigger conversations about society in general, right? About, what do we do for people that don't have all the same opportunities, and that's where it gets difficult too, is, there's the scope of this movie, and that conversation, I think, rapidly moves beyond the scope of what's depicted in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting film. It's because it is something that's close to home, and it makes me really look at like documentaries and what is the truth and what isn't, and how editing and what you show and what you don't show really can impact the view, and what are the ramifications and effects of those things, and both on the actual subjects, the kids in this, plus the school. I mean, there's a lot of the pressure that they had too being filmed.
Right.
How did that shape their experience?
Right.
Because the minute you have cameras on and you're the subject of a film, that also alters and changes your reality. And is the filmmaking process that shining a spotlight on them, does that have some impact into how the story played out? Did one person feel like, hey, I am a superstar? Again, I'm not saying that's what, again, I'm just wondering if I'm going to school and you're making a film about me, I think I'm getting a little bit of this, a little bit like, hey, I must be that good, and I am going to the NBA. I don't know, I'm just playing into that. Like, what is the effect? It'd be nice to talk to Arthur and William and say, like, what did the fact that there was a film being made that kind of centered around you, how did that impact your experience, your choices, throughout those years?
Right. And people are going to treat you differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Even kids who might want to be your friend now, who might not have been your friend, like all those, like it's just
right.
It changes your whole experience by doing that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of almost interesting. One of the questions I would have loved to ask St. Joe's, and like, why did you agree to this?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You couldn't just come in and film. You had to agree to that,
What did they say that made you think this would help your program? What was the,
what was the selling point here? Was it something you thought you were going to get out of it? Or was it just, hey, it sounds like a good, noble, project, or, because like you said, it started off as one thing and became something else.
Yeah.
So, and at what point does the filmmaking shape the story or create the story? It's like, and again, not saying negatively about the people who made it. I'm just saying you kind of go down that path of like, we set out with this, but wow, there's a story here. And then my own personal, like any document, I always tell people when we would cover documentaries in my class, I'm like, every documentary has some sort of agenda to a certain degree. They have some sort of side. Now, a good documentary will try to represent both sides as equally as possible, but there's always going to be a slant of what they believe, of what they feel or what their issues might be that they think are important. Those are going to come to light in the editing and in the final product. So yeah, I mean, there was a quote on, like, cause I'm Facebook friends and stuff with a lot of the people. And it was like when Gene, like when he died and stuff, it was just like even just like quotes that he had about things. And I never took him as just a win at all costs type of thing. His thing was winning is really important, but if it is just about winning and not what you do after, the winning doesn't mean a thing. Gene Pingatore. I mean, that was just like, yeah, he was a hard guy in some ways, but he's also a funny guy. He's also, like I said, and the relationship that the basketball players that I have seen over the years who go back to him and have gone back to him is something special. And they've gone into business and they've gone into other areas. So I know, Pat, you mentioned like they don't have other options. I think why it hurts so much is because my belief is that St. Joe's was always big about, you're not just a basketball player. Like when you're here, you're going to work hard and you're going to be a basketball player. You're going to learn because we have a tradition and we have expectations by all means, but at the same time, if you don't go to the NBA, what are you going to do? I always felt that question was always posed, in my opinion. Again, I can't speak for, like, do people hear it? Do people listen to that? Do they respond to that? I don't know. But I always felt like that, and a lot of these guys that were basketball players in my years when I was there, they went on, they're successful business people, and they took what they learned in the basketball court and applied it to life. And they credit to Gene Pingatore for that, where maybe they would have been in a gang somewhere. Maybe they would have been, like you said, they're growing up in sometimes very harsh communities and things like that, where like crime is an issue and the traps and the temptations that we didn't face, were there. So and I think that was the overall vibe, it was like you said, the school becomes sort of a villain in a case where realistically its intentions were not to ever be a villain. It was to actually do the opposite, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And again, is there perfection there? No, no one's perfect. Is that school 100%? No, it's not. I mean, I was there. There's things where my parents were like, what? You know, but like overall, like the experience was always a positive experience. So yeah. It'd be great. This is a good one to follow up on. I think I'm going to, because, you know, I forgot about this film for such a long time till it was on the list. And it's like, I've never gone back because it's a 3 hour, it's a time commitment, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I never just had the opportunity to really go back, and it kind of makes me want to go back and do that. You know, I was coaching, I knew some of those kids, and I knew some of the brothers of kids who are in there. Like when they show up, zoom in on William Gates's picture, it's like, oh God, the kid of the night, I know that kid. You know, it's like the hallways just all comes back. It's kind of crazy, but I always remember it as a special place. But
yeah. All right. Before we get into 3 questions, anything else we want to say about the movie itself? We've solved all the world's problems.
Every single one.
I know one of the damning scenes there is like the transcripts. Or he's trying to get the transcripts. They're saying you owe this money for not releasing them. So I'd love to know what the backstory is to that. Like I don't see them as just being like a school that would just be like, you know, you owe us money, we ain't giving you this, or like
right. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. All right. It's time for 3 questions.
He asks each traveler 5 questions. 3 questions. 3 questions.
It's impossible to answer.
Impossible because you don't know the answer.
Nobody could answer that question.
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
All right. Question number 1. When you were a kid, what did you want to grow up to be?
Baseball player.
Yeah, me too.
Pitcher for the White Sox.
Well, I don't know about all that now, but
well, some people have higher dreams.
Ooh, wow. Okay. All right.
Some people settle for Northside.
All right. Well played.
Some people have higher dreams than the North Side. Some people have nightmares.
Well, this year, yeah.
Indeed.
Or beyond nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
But man, see, we take it good. The difference, yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you do. Anyway.
I think you guys would, because you took it for so many years.
Well, you know, after a while, you just become numb. I'm trying to think back. I probably would have said writer, because even as a kid, you know, my dad had an old typewriter, and I remember stealing it and putting it in my room, and I would, you know, just rip out pieces of paper from my school notebooks and try to type up stories on it. And then my sister would get angry at me because her room was near my room and the typewriter was loud. And, you know, so I was always writing something. I was drawing something. So, you know, if you had asked me as a kid, I probably would have said like a writer or, you know, a comic book artist, comic book writer, something like that.
Now, when you say writer, do you think like novel books or journalism or?
As a kid, novels, books, kind of a thing. Because
Okay.
even up until middle school, you know, I was thinking like, you know, because middle school in particular, it was more about the art. Like I really loved my art classes. I was drawing a lot of stuff. I was drawing in a very comic booky kind of style. So it would have, I think, been some mixture of art and writing. And then once I got into high school, then I think it was because I loved working on the school newspaper in high school. So I think at that point, that's when I would have said, oh no, this journalism thing. I love going out and interviewing people. I love uncovering these stories and writing about them. And so it evolved into that a little bit. And then somewhere along the way, I gave up on all of it completely. Last time I tried to write anything like a novel was probably when I was in high school, and then I got angry at the whole thing for not being what I wanted it to be, and I think I threw it in the fireplace.
As you do.
As you do, you know.
Right.
See our previous conversation that will air next week about what happens when your writing does not meet your perfection standards. Pat, what did you want to be when you grew up? Did you want to be a baller? Did you want to be a little bit taller?
Real boy.
If you had a girl, would you call her?
I don't even know how to proceed with the last 10 seconds of conversation. I wanted to be Indiana Jones.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to, like, you know, be knowledgeable about history, speak different languages, be able to fly, yes, land, no, ride motorcycles, ride horses. And, you know, even if I'm in over my head, I can find a way through. So there were a number of things that.
So an adventure explorer.
Yeah.
Or precisely Indiana Jones, or just that kind of life thing.
Well, it probably depended, you know, like, yes. It kind of vacillated, you know, between all of that stuff. There was one time in 4th or 5th grade, we went to the museum and they had an Egyptian experiment, the ancient Egypt, and they had a bunch of artifacts and all that kind of thing. And I remember I picked up a book on hieroglyphics, and I was going to take the summer and learn how to read hieroglyphics. And
I tried to do that too.
Yeah, I didn't get so far. That was, I think I learned, okay, maybe I should stick with beginning Spanish. But yeah, I wanted to be able to, you know, do all that kind of, like, yeah, you know, specifically archaeology and what Indiana Jones did. But then, yeah, overall adventure, fight bad guys and all that. And then there was a number of other things that as I was growing up, I'm like, yeah, I know I'm going to do, that's what I'm going to, you know, and plans, and, you know, life takes its own journey.
At one point, I also wanted to be an archaeologist because I loved dinosaurs. I loved all that stuff. In fact, I even I somehow found something in the backyard, and I dug out the rest of it, and I was completely convinced that I had, like, the jawbone of a dinosaur.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, this is so cool. I found a dinosaur in my backyard. And then I feel like my parents either took it somewhere or they took like a 10-second look at it, and they're like, I think that's a dog. I was totally convinced, though, that I had dug up some kind of dinosaur bones. They're like, no, I think that's probably the dog of the people who lived in this house before us.
It's a prehistoric dog.
Right. Yeah.
It's a dog of ancient times.
Yeah. Dogosaurus.
Dogosaurus, definitely.
Dogosaurus Rex. All right. Number 2. Was there a class that you struggled in at school?
Trigonometry.
Amen to that. That's my choice.
God, what devil person designed that?
Yeah. And were you good at math or not good at math?
Yeah, like all the other stuff.
Math. I was in algebra 1, algebra 2, I was in everything algebra. And I think because it came so easy. And then all of a sudden you get to this class called trigonometry, and you're like, okay, enough with the numbers. What are you doing?
Right.
Now you're just making stuff up.
Cosines and tangents and no.
So I had never gotten, this was actually at the school in Hoop Dreams. It was at St. Joe's, and the teacher was Mr. Q, Mr. Quattrochi. Hey, shout out to Mr. Q. And this guy was, I mean, he was funny. He dressed up as an elf in the elf outfit, not on Halloween, just randomly.
As you do.
As one does, I guess.
It was just, yeah. And then there'd be things where he'd, you know, give you a test. He'd go outside. He'd peek through the window outside. Just see all the kids, one guard in the door on the inside of the building, you know, like, hey, he's not coming yet. He's not coming. He's outside looking through a window, you know, in the middle of winter. And then things like where he'd point on the thing, he goes, in my notes here, it says that I really need to emphasize this to you guys. And he would pause and he would go, there it is. There it is. And just, anyway, I'm flunking that class at the midterms. I got an F. I've never had an F in my entire life. I'm freaking out. My parents are going to kill me. You know, what the heck? This math, I'm just overwhelmed. Like you said, like just everything about it. And I remember he had the conversation. It was, you got to come and you got to put in the effort. You know, it's been easy up until now. And now it's not so easy, is it? And I'm like, no. So what do I do?
No, it sucks. Thank you very much.
And I remember busting my butt and getting it up to a C plus. And our grading was very different than public school. A 93 and above was an A. So if you had a 90, 91, 92, you still had a B. You know, and then I forgot, I want to say it was 85, and I think I ended up having an 84, something like that. And I was a point away from a B, and I worked my ass off the second half, and I ended up still getting the C. And I remember thinking, is he going to give me the B? Like, come on, I worked harder, I got off, and it was just like, no, I mean, that's the grade you got. And I just remember, but he was like, it was kind of the idea of like, it was probably the lowest grade I ever got, which is probably the grade I was the most proud of in some ways, because it was a time where I was struggling. It was a time where it was a class that I was failing, and I got that thing up to a C. I just fell short of the B, and I didn't earn a B. I earned a C, and they were honest with you. And again, that comes back to St. Joe's and that style of school. Nowadays, that's probably an A.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't even have to put in extra work.
An A with a letter of
I didn't even have to
recommendation for
put
another A.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even have to put in the extra work to get that A, probably. I just have to maybe cry a little bit.
Well, you probably could have done nothing and gotten 50%.
Exactly. I would have been starting right from 50. Instead, I worked my ass off to get that first 50. Yeah. And that's all I got because of the stupid trigonometry. But yeah, so anyway, so it was like one of those classes that, I just remember thinking like there was a challenge. That was the message. There was a challenge. I was failing. I worked hard. I put in the time, put in the effort. I had somebody who helped me, but I took advantage of that help. I got up to a point that was a C, it was average. I fell short of the B, and nothing to hang my head about at that point, because it wasn't about the grade. It was about the process. It was about the challenge of overcoming something. So again, I come back and I'm, defending St. Joe's in that, because that's what they gave you, ethic and a character and a not quit mentality and a holistic thing. And there's bigger things. You might not be the smartest person, but you can be of service to your community, all those things. So, all that just kind of gets summed up in that C for me. But trigonometry, damn trigonometry.
No kidding, man.
If I may.
It was my understanding that there would be no math.
Exactly.
Trigonometry isn't even math. That's what I'm going to say. It's like some sci-fi weird subject.
Yes.
It's imagine you just hieroglyphics. I think it's hieroglyphics in there too. I think it's got everything.
And if you stare at it too long, you end up making a little mountain out of your mashed potatoes at dinner that night and saying how important it is. And I mean, it's just,
That's right. I had blood coming out of my ears too.
Or
it's so dumb.
Or you unlock everything and you see this clock timer counting down.
And honestly, I can't even tell you if I remember anything from trigonometry at all. The only thing I remember is our trig teacher showing us the transparency of his impacted wisdom teeth on the overhead.
Right. See, that's what you remember.
That's what I remember. He's like, he was explaining to us what it was. And then later on, like 2 years later, when I had the same thing and had to have my wisdom teeth pulled, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what Mr. Gilliam showed us in class.
Yeah. Yeah. I had him too.
Yeah.
Worst grade I ever got in high school.
My worst grade in high school was probably the advanced math class that I had senior year. And it was that point because I just didn't care anymore.
I actually did better at that nonsense.
Really? No,
which I don't understand because I shouldn't have. There's zero reason for it.
I did fine in trig. I did absolutely fine in trig. I did not do well in that advanced math class that was senior year, and
trig,
which is hilarious because in 8th grade, when we moved back from England to the U.S., I was living in Southwest Missouri, and I think I was coasting off the benefits of having lived in a country that was like 2 years ahead of America in terms of education. And I came back, and that year in 8th grade in Missouri, I went to the Missouri State Math Competition and got 2nd place. If you would have, see, I got the balloons.
Can you run that by us again?
Yeah, I got 2nd place. Second place in the Missouri State Math Competition, and I'm the one that keeps using the phrase, "It was my understanding there would be no math." So imagine my surprise. Again, I had coasted and things had been easy up to a certain point. And then I get to advanced math in high school, and I am just completely bombing it. Like, I think I might have ended up with a C+ in that class, and I tried. Like, I went in for the extra help. I tried. I did everything, and I was just naturally good at math up to that point, and just something about being in that class. Well, I hated my teacher my junior year, so that probably didn't help going into senior year. And I think at that point I was just tired. I was like, you know what? I've been accepted into the school I need to get into for college. I don't care.
I'm tired.
So that was my high school one where I didn't do very well. My college one, my first year of college was not good at all. Like, I almost didn't make it to a second year just because, I don't know. I did not do well going off on my own for the first time and moving away from home.
It was an adjustment period.
It was definitely an adjustment period. The one, though, the only class I ever dropped that I never completed was I for some reason thought this would be a fun class to take, even though I hate bugs. I took an entomology class.
Oh.
The science and study of insects.
Because
I don't know, Bo.
Because it wasn't math.
Bo, that's like asking me, why is the carpet wet? I don't know, Bo.
Hey, when you flood your basement and the carpet is wet, it is not my fault.
Which is often. Although not when we're talking about math or bugs.
Okay.
But, other things. Yeah, no, for some reason I thought this class would be really cool because it was, of course, I'm at a big school. I'm at University of Illinois, and you don't get too many opportunities to actually have your professor, like the professor of the class. You don't have too many opportunities to have the professor in a smaller group setting. And I had to take a science class. So I'm like, oh, well, this sounds kind of fun. I've heard this professor does like an insect movie marathon where they do movies like Them and stuff like that. I'm like, all right, that'll be cool. I like that stuff. Well, the section that I had signed up for it was a huge class. Like, there were a couple hundred kids at least in this class. And the section I had signed up for was when you had your not your lecture, but your other classroom class, and it was only like 24 kids in that one. Instead of it being a grad student TA, it was the professor that was teaching that section. And I thought, okay, well, that'll be kind of cool. I hear really good things about this professor. I like all this stuff. Absolutely. Let's do this. What I didn't quite realize was that, and I had taken Latin when I was in school in England, but really hadn't done much with it beyond that point. What I didn't realize when we got to the first test was how much of the first test in that semester was based on the Latin names of all of these bugs and me having to memorize the Latin names of all these bugs. And so that did not go well. The test did not go well, Enterprise. And John bombed that very first test. And it kind of made me panic a little bit because my other grades were not stellar at that point either. And the other project we had to do as part of that class, and it was that section only that was being run by the professor that had to do this, was you were going to be given a bug and you had to keep it alive for the semester.
Oh, boy.
And for someone who does not like bugs at all, that was the point at which I needed to get off the bus. So that was the point where I was like, nope, I bombed this first test. My whole purpose in life is to not keep bugs alive. It's exactly the opposite. So no, I think I'm done. Thank you. And I dropped the class. And that was the only time I had ever dropped a class ever in my entire life, but it was the right decision. And it was also when the professor came to class and brought with her various foods that had bugs baked into them.
Yeah, that's a whole thing about bugs that I've just never been able to wrap my head around the whole.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just saw Dennis's background and I was distracted and horrified. Yeah, the whole thing about chocolate bugs and fried bugs and that.
Yeah, she had Rice Krispie treats that had bees baked into it.
What?
And brownies with ants baked into it.
Why do people
why
find the need to do things like
that?
It doesn't have to be this way.
No, we have the brownies. We already have the brownies. It does not need to have anything else added to it. Like, we are not in a state where there are parts of the world where it is required that you eat something different because you don't have what these other things are. We don't have that here. Yeah. So it's not necessary to supplement the Rice Krispie treats with bees.
Right.
No.
If it were, all aboard, down the hatch. It's not. So stop it.
Stop it.
Just don't. Dennis, that's the most terrifying background I've ever seen in my entire life.
Right. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I'm proud of Bo coming up with cosine and remembering those terms there, man. That's pretty good.
I'm telling you, if there's a little bit of PTSD in there. Like those things are
stuck
bad.
a little bit. Like, I mean, I looked it up and I had to go, what the heck was actually trigonometry? It's the branch of mathematics.
Sine, cosine. What was it? Sine, cosine, and tangent?
Sine, cosine, tangent, secant, cosecant, and...
Concerned with specific functions of angles and their application to calculations. There are 6 functions, like you just said: sine, cosine, tangent, cotangent, secant, and cosecant. The only one I got out of that was I've been known to go off on some tangents.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bo, I'd also like to point out that as you were counting off the different things you were trying to remember about trigonometry, I believe you missed using the appropriate finger.
I did, didn't I? I didn't quite get there because I couldn't remember enough of them.
No, you skipped it. There's a right finger to use when reminiscing about math.
That's true.
All right, so we got Pat.
Yeah, Pat. What's yours?
I'm just. What was that?
What if it's music?
Right.
Well, I will say there were some classes in college that like they would have to grade on a curve because like the highest score was like a 38%. You know, like just ridiculous. Yeah, music, just ridiculously hard music history or music theory classes or an analysis of music. I mean, just, you know, there's some ridiculous things like that. But, you know, my mom and I went to the same school, and there was a professor there when she got there that had just retired when I came in. But his line was always like, and it had been that way for he's like, I'm going to get to know some of you very well over the next couple of years. And because just so many people failed this class, it was just common. And, but no, I'd say my biggest struggle was math. It was, it just, the last time math made sense was 6th grade. 7th and 8th grade was really a struggle. And it was like, I'm not processing this. Like I would do it and then I would I'd fail, I'd retake the test, I'd end up with a passing grade. And when I'd retake the test, it was like, it wasn't like I was understanding the material and, oh, here were my mistakes, I'll fix them. It wasn't good. And then I got in, and whatever I did, was it Algebra 2 freshman year? Because then geometry was sophomore year, and geometry made sense. I got through that. But then it was Algebra 2 and then pre-calc. And I was in an honors track. And I don't know why I was in it. Well, I know I was in an honors track, but I was just failing miserably. And I had the same teacher, and it was like, I had a 12% going on a test one time and studying. And I'd go see the teacher before school, see the teacher after school, see the teacher at lunch. Like every day I would see the teacher 4 or 5 times going over the same stuff, but it would never click. My dad tried to help me. It just never clicked. And so I got through freshman year. Geometry was good. But then junior year, it was like, I walked into that class and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make sure that there isn't 1 minute that goes by where I'm confused. And if there's 1 minute of this class that I'm confused, I'm going to put my hand up. I'm going to ask questions till I am not confused. And within 3 minutes of sitting in the class, I just put my pencil down and I'm just like, I'm done. I'm going to fail this class. Like, I don't have any idea what he's saying. Like, I can't even comprehend it. And somehow I squeaked by, I passed. And then I just begged and borrowed. And finally we twisted the arm of the administrative guidance counselor and all that, so it was like, okay, we'll move you out of this honors track. And then my senior year, I did pretty well in math, but the problem was the damage was done of 5 years of there being like just no comprehension of anything I'm doing. So there's just this big gap in my understanding of math. It's just not there. So yeah, math was my struggle.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I feel you there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, on a slightly more positive note, at one point, question number 3, at one point, Arthur gets a job at Pizza Hut. What was the best thing about the old school pizza places of the 80s?
Wow.
And I know my answer right away. It is
the arcade games.
It is the arcade games. It is
that's where I was going to.
The combination Pac-Man Galaga tabletop game.
The tabletop, yes, the tabletop arcade games.
We had we had a Mr. Gaddy's Pizza in Mesquite, Texas, and they had, because this was like, you know, we also had a Showbiz Pizza in Mesquite, Texas, or in Dallas, and so we'd go there for, like, you know, birthday parties and whatever, but you didn't go there every day, or you didn't even go there like once a week or once every other week. That was like special occasions. But Mr. Gaddy's Pizza, you'd go and you'd get pizza, and they started off kind of small. They started off with just, you know, a couple video games here and there, and then they, you know, as a kid growing up, like, they started to expand. They had a few more things. I don't remember if the location we went to pretty frequently then added skee ball. I'm trying to remember when they added that, but some of them started to add more and more games. And I remember I remember looking this up a few years ago. Then it got to the point where they started to become almost like a Dave & Buster's, where, like, here was your restaurant, and then you just had thousands of square feet of video games. But as a kid, I remember, like, the old school decorations. I'm talking like old school 1980s Pizza Hut decorations, where, you know, you actually had, like, glass cups, and you had you know, candles on the table, and you had the lights, and you had everything else, and then you had the
pizza came out in the cast iron pan, and it was hotter than all get out. Oh yeah.
But yeah, that was favorite memories would be the while everybody was still having their pizza, I had some of my pizza, and then made my little way over to the Galaga Pac-Man combination tabletop game.
Yep. I remember those tabletop games.
Yep. I'd say the same thing. Just the environment, just the vibe, the smell. I mean, I guess you can find places now, but I don't know. It's not the same.
It's not.
Is there anywhere that really kind of has that same old school kind of vibe to it?
There's a rumor going around, and I don't think there's any close by, but there's a rumor going around that some Pizza Huts are opening up.
I thought like they're doing vintage Pizza Huts.
Yeah, Pizza Hut Classic or something. They're calling it, and it's similar.
They're called McDonald's. We're called McDowell's.
Exactly.
I'm gonna say there's a place. The closest I think, I haven't been there in a little bit. There's used to be Salerno's in Irwin. They had batting cages out back. They had, you know, like you said, the arcade games, and it just, that smell, and it was just,
From a straight up, like, pizza coming out in a cast iron pan and being served that way, Pequod's in Morton Grove does that. But they don't have but the place is so small, they don't have the games and the other stuff. Like, the rest of the atmosphere is not there. But the pizza is.
Some of them, even Salerno's, went a little bit more like sports bar.
Okay.
I think a lot of places migrated to that more, you know.
Sure.
Sports bar vibe versus.
So I did find a website that, as of, what year was this? This is December of 2023, that claims that there are 2 Pizza Hut classics left in Illinois.
Oh.
Really?
So I don't know if that's still true, but.
Yeah, right. Where do we go?
Road trip. Let's go.
And when does their lunch buffet start?
Do the actual podcast there.
There you go.
Back to a live summer one.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I credit Pizza Hut with my strong sense of literacy and my childhood obesity.
Indeed.
We used to get the pan, man, and I'm telling you, like, that. I know it wasn't probably but the buttery, sort of crispy, perfect piece of toast with some butter, and then you had the cheese. You used to get the veggie lovers, and I loved the veggie lovers. Man. It was good.
I love their breadsticks too. Those were always good.
My mom's favorite too. It's like she used to love Pizza Hut. We haven't had it in a while, but like, she used to love the pizza crust, the thick pan. Because I was not really I was more of a thin crust person, but that was the one place to get that next kind of, was it the original hand tossed? I don't even know what it was called.
Yeah,
but Yeah, it just had that nice little elevated, crispy bottom. But you looked in the bottom, you're like, God, that has to be like either a bunch of butter or oil. But man, it's good.
Mm-hmm.
It's all right. If you got to go, what a way to go.
We're making Pat hungry.
I'm really hungry. I'm like thinking like, okay, when is the next 30 something like food tour? Chicago pizza food tour.
Yeah.
Oh, man. When we were in New York, we hit pizza like every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And I told Dominic, I'm like, look, man, this ain't healthy, but there's some really good pizza here, so we're gonna get on it.
Once, man. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was say vacation game on.
Yeah.
I will say,
And
if you haven't seen it yet, the new Quiet Place movie, the concept of pizza does feature prominently.
So you did see it. Yeah, I was going to see
did.
it though, but I'm going to see it this week, maybe even tomorrow.
Yeah.
So you can just give me a quick thumbs up, thumbs down, or what?
Thumbs up. The only thing that and I won't tell you why. You and I can talk about it once you've seen it. The ending was fine. I think it was fine.
Okay.
It was good. I would have done something slightly different with the ending.
Okay.
My thought, and my daughter, because I took Nora to go see it, and we both kind of had the same thing. We're like, okay, well, here's what I would have done differently with the ending. The ending was fine, but I think this could have had a little bit more emotional impact to the ending of the movie. This is what I would have done differently. And she's like, totally. I was thinking the same thing. Okay, good.
All right. And then if you rank the three,
I'd say maybe 1, 3, 2.
Okay.
But I mean, they're all really close. Like I liked all three.
One is number one still, I think, for me.
Yeah.
And then, okay. And 2 I liked, but
yeah.
Yeah. So it's good that you have this possibly ahead of 2.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
So not like Planet of the Apes. So there we go.
Yeah. No.
Jeez.
Uh-huh. All right. Well, I think that does it. We got most everybody's thoughts were the pizza, the video games. So I think we got everybody's.
Yeah.
And I just want to follow up before you wrap up the St. Joe's one too, because like again, I don't want to, I don't want to make assumptions about one of those characters or the other character or anything because I don't know them personally. It's like I can only experience like some of the things I've heard. And again, when you hear something, I'm not out to slam any of them. I'm just trying to figure out like why was the experience that I had and so many other St. Joseph Chargers seem to be portrayed differently, and could that be up to other factors? And that's all I'm doing is just kind of struggling through that process of like, how did the reality that you guys kind of take it, like when you watch that documentary, has sort of a negative tone about St. Joe's in some ways. How does that, how do I wrestle with that, knowing a different experience? And then I'm just left to surmise, like, was it real? Could have been, not saying it could have been, or could it have been possibility of a bunch of different factors like we discussed, the filming of a crew being there, changing people's choices, behaviors, attitudes, the school changing some of the way they do things because of a camera light on them. I don't know. So I'm not out to slam anybody or anything. I wish both those guys and former fellow Chargers well. And, and when I bring up the other things, I don't mean to bring up, like, I'm just saying like what path you go on. I don't know. It's like everybody has their struggles, and that didn't work out apparently as much. St. Joe's, the benefit coming from there for one of them, and it seemed like the other one it did. So I don't know.
Yeah. All right. That's going to do it for this one. If you want to find more of our episodes, 30podcast.com has got all of our past episodes over there, over 530 whatever at this point. If you join us over on Patreon, there's also about 50 plus bonus episodes over there. That really helps us out. It helps cover the cost of the show. And donating at any level over there, if you join us over there, there's different benefits, different levels, but any of that just helps us out and gets you access to those bonus episodes as well. So we want you to become a listener with benefits, is what I think I'm saying.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Does that sound right? Okay.
Yeah.
Pat, are you disagreeing?
I am not disagreeing.
Okay.
I would like to provide benefits for all our listeners.
Okay. All right. Pat wants to be your friend with benefits.
I care.
Yes,
I care.
He cares. And everybody who joins gets a free compromising photo of Pat that I have. So that's another thing. I don't really have those.
It's too bad. We'll have to make one.
I don't, but AI. I mean, you can make anything with AI. So
AI.
All right. Yes. So we're almost done with the month of July, our fun and games month, where we've been covering sports and game type movies. We've done Angels in the Outfield, Quiz Show, Cobb. This time was Hoop Dreams. Next week, we're talking about Maverick, the Mel Gibson movie from 94. Our Patreon episodes this month, Patreon short is Shatter Dead, a shot-on-video movie from 1994 about a zombie apocalypse. Our full-length Patreon episode this month was Breakin' and Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo from 1984. And then next month, to give you a little bit of a preview of next month, and if you want to get ahead and check out some of these movies yourself, good luck on the Patreon episode trying to find that one somewhere. But our Patreon next month is Damselvis, Daughter of Helvis, another shot-on-video movie from 1994. The Patreon shorts, I'm going to try to do 2 of them next month because there's a couple of movies coming out that I really want to see. Deadpool and Wolverine is coming out at the very end of July, and then Alien Romulus is coming out in August. So I'm going to try to hit both of those up and then maybe do some quick little 10-minute reviews of those. Our regular episodes next month in August will start off with a very special Highlander 2, The Crappening, and then we'll be doing The Hudsucker Proxy, Ed Wood, Forrest Gump, and Immortal Beloved. So, got some good stuff coming up in the month of August.
Yes.
Gentlemen, and as always, thank you for being here with me.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Now I kind of just want to go have some pizza and play some video games.
Yes,
Indeed.
to everything.
Learn about Cuba.
Eating some food.
And not doing any math at all.
Indeed.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Everybody, go watch some good movies. Be excellent to each other. Go watch some good movies. And we will see you back here next time.
Bring the lights down low, it's time to show. Lights, camera, you know what we mean. Behold the magic of the silver screen. Some movies rock, some movies shock. They're powerful, alright. We cover them all on your favorite part. So many movies we can choose. Even when you win, you lose. Life moves pretty fast. Some will fizzle and some movies last. I understood there would be no math. It's the 30-something movie podcast. Be excellent to each other. Peace out and word to your mother. They're from the best decades. Movie magic that never fades. Lightsabers clash, phasers set to stun. Action packed from dusk till dawn. We have deep thoughts and questions free. Come share our love of the movies we see. Life moves pretty fast. Some will fizzle and some movies last. I understood there would be no math. It's the 30-something movie podcast.
Dennis, there was a missed opportunity just a little bit ago when you were talking about the math class that you struggled through, and then you worked really, really hard, and you ended up with, what'd you say you ended up with a C+?
C+.
Yeah. You know what that makes me think of?
Yeah.
That sometimes,
when you win,
even when you win, you lose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
30 podcast.
Yeah.